The JMF Advisors Show is a podcast for business owners, C-suite executives, and entrepreneurs who are looking to build, grow, or even exit a business.
We bring in some of our best financial advisors to interview experts on business best practices, hot topics, and sprinkle in some tax and accounting help.
If you're a business owner, startup founder, CFO, or just starting your side hustle, this podcast is for you. All right, welcome back to the JMF Advisors Show. I'm flying solo today in studio. We've got two great guests from New Orleans and the firm of Chaffe and Associates. First off, we've got Vanessa Brown Claiborne, President and CEO, and Riley Busenlener, VP and also a shareholder with Vanessa. So welcome, you guys. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you both here. A lot of folks know I'm from New Orleans, so it's good to see some folks from the old homestead. I was telling Vanessa before, I haven't lived there in over 30 years, so it's been a minute. But glad to have you both here. Today we're talking about how to value your business. Obviously, Vanessa and Riley both are very well accomplished in business valuations, have their certifications. They're both CPAs, which I was not aware of prior to doing some research on it. So you guys have all the letters you can imagine behind your name, so appreciate all of that. We're doing a series, just to give you guys a little context, we're doing a series around either selling your business or valuing your business and doing some of that for business owners. So we really thought it'd be a good time to bring in some folks like you. JamisonMoneyFarmer works with Chaffe on quite a few mutual clients. So thought it'd be great to sort of talk through the valuation process. We get asked, quite often about that. We've talked to investment bankers and other folks kind of getting companies prepared for sale. So I guess, Vanessa, I'll start with you. Not every business valuation is due to a sale. Certainly, actually, probably most are not, would be my guess. What are some of the reasons folks would get a business valuation?
Sure. So as you know, we do this full time. So there's a lot of reasons to have a business valuation. One of the main areas we work in is estate and gift tax, and also charitable contributions of interest in private companies. As you know, and I think you've addressed this topic, the high tax exemptions for transferring businesses to heirs are probably coming to an end at the end of 2025 if Congress doesn't act. So we're picking up speed there. We're getting pretty busy. People are starting to plan about, a year and a half to do it. So we work a lot in that area. And also just, we work mainly with private businesses, and the private business is typically the largest asset in somebody's portfolio of assets. They own real estate, stocks and bonds, and you really don't know exactly what it's worth. So just from a financial planning perspective, it's good to know what your primary asset is worth. So a lot of people do it just for their own financial planning. We do some employee stock ownership plans, buy-sell agreements. If you're going to enter into a partnership with someone else, please do your buy-sell agreement with great legal advice in the beginning. And we are happy, we consult on those a lot of times because you want that language to be very clear. Riley works a lot in litigation, so he'll do, bankruptcies. Riley, you want to talk a little about the litigation there?
Shareholders, breakup of companies, whatever the purpose may be, but usually it's some sort of shareholder dispute where one of them, or member dispute, where one of them is leaving and wants out.
Yeah. Riley, speaking of letters after your name, you're also an attorney, isn't that right?
I am. I don't practice, but I do maintain my license in good standing.
There you go. All right. Well, speaking of just valuations in general, Riley, why don't you sort of give us the kind of overview, lay of the land for the terminology that most people will hear related to valuations in general?
Sure. I'll start with some of the terminology, and then I'll go into a little bit of the process to answer both parts of that question. So,
Sure.
Just to some basic groundwork, and we're always valuing the equity of the company, and the total value of the equity. But there's another term called total enterprise value, and sometimes you'd alluded to the sale of a company. It's always important to get which one you're talking about first down. Is it the total enterprise value, which is all the equity plus the long-term debt, or is it just the value of the equity? We had a client once who we kept telling them the company was worth a certain amount, and they heard that they got an offer for twice that, and thought we were foolish until we sat down with a potential buyer, and the buyer was talking total enterprise value, and we had been always talking about just total equity, and it was actually our equity number plus their debt. So it's important to figure out, are we talking about total enterprise value, or are we talking about equity value?
The bank still wants to get paid, don't they?
Shockingly, when they lend you
Yeah.
money, they do want back. Another term you'll hear a lot of is EBITDA, and that's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And that usually goes along with total enterprise value to come up with some sort of multiple. So a lot of times when you hear businesses being traded or sold, you'll hear just, well, we sold it for 6. And they're going to say 6 times what? It's just understood it's 6 times EBITDA.
Right.
Similar to EBITDA is something called seller's discretionary earnings. That's pretty akin to EBITDA. The only difference really is that seller's discretionary earnings clearly has some sort of owner's compensation adjustment to it. Most EBITDA figures have adjustments as well to owner's compensation, especially if the owners are overpaying or underpaying themselves according to market rates. I always say we're not here to audit the company or figure out if you're being overpaid or underpaid or anything like that. We just want to know what it is from a third party standpoint. And the reason we're always looking for a third party standpoint is one of the terms you'll hear is fair market value. And it is the definition of that has to do with 2 unrelated parties, both knowledgeable, no compulsion to transact, and what would they buy or sell the business for in between the 2 of them. And so we're always looking for that third party standpoint of what is a market rate and what should they be paying themselves, or because some owners don't pay themselves enough, and some owners would rather take it as compensation instead of distributions.
Right.
You also hear add backs or adjustments, and those are always oftentimes debated. There are a lot of
Hotly contested.
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes there are a lot of that aren't, and those are things like, oh, we had a fire or we had a theft, and that's a unforeseen, hopefully unrecurring incident. But then sometimes it's are the sports tickets, or is that something a third party would have to continue? What about the condo or something like that, or it may or may not be a truly legitimate business expense, but those sometimes can be debated, as well as owner's compensation.
Right.
And then you'll also
That's
hear
where
about
where you
discount.
hear adjusted EBITDA.
Yes, adjusted EBITDA. Oftentimes it's just EBITDA and the adjustment is understood. Just because it's that common. And some people want to add back everything, and like all of the owner's compensation. And if the owner is active in the business, a third party is going to either have to pay themselves or someone else to manage the business in lieu of the owner. So it's not necessarily all of the owner's compensation. You just want to figure out what the right amount is. And then if you're talking about fair market value, especially in terms of gift and estate, you'll hear about discounts. And the 2 primary ones that you'll see are discounts for lack of control and discounts for lack of marketability. And that's because if you're selling just a small portion of the business, you won't be able to control the business. You won't be able to decide when there are distributions. You won't be able to decide who's managing it, things like that, because you won't have enough vote power to do so. And then because it's a privately held entity, you're probably not going to be able to call your broker and have cash in your account 3 days later. So it's harder to sell and harder to liquefy. So there's discounts for those things as well. So those are the go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt there. Just quick question. You guys see a lot of, potential acquisition sales and whatnot. I'm curious, you mentioned the lack of control. Are you seeing a good amount of non-controlling interest shares trading with some of these private equities that aren't going, either buying all of it or buying a majority component of it?
I would say we don't see a lot of transactions where it's not a controlling interest. Those are extraordinarily rare and hard to sell, frankly. A lot of people aren't interested in that unless it's some sort of a internal dynamic where it's a manager is taking over for the current owner, or family members are stepping up and buying into the company, or new partners in a law firm or something like that, where they're internal. But from a third party perspective, it's really hard to find somebody who wants a non-controlling interest in a business.
And I'll pipe in, there are private equity groups out there that say they want, less than majority interest, et cetera. But, read those documents carefully, because they might own a 49%. But if you read those documents, they control. Or if you don't meet your projections, they're suddenly in control. But there are, groups of private equity that do certainly take less than majority stakes.
Yeah. Sometimes when you can own 49%, but then you have 3 of the 4 on the board, then
Exactly.
the effective ownership and control is different than the other. All right, Riley, we kind of got you off track, so let's go to the business valuation process.
Sure. So if you hire an appraiser to do a valuation, most all of us are going to ask for a whole laundry list of information to get started. Starting with everything from the organizing documents and current financial statements, all the way down to, how many employees do you have, whatever it may be. And that's so that we can really educate ourselves and understand and analyze the financial statements and everything gets started. We're also going to do a lot of research in terms of the economy, your local economy, state, nation, whatever it may be, your market area. We're going to look at all kinds of industry information. A lot of times we'll even ask if a company's involved in a certain trade group or things like that, so we can go and research those publications, understand what's moving in the industry and what's driving values. And all of that is so that we can really be prepared for when we do a management interview, with due diligence. And oftentimes that's an on-site interview with management, so we can see, how the widgets are being made, if you will. It doesn't always make sense if it's like a grocery store. If you've seen one grocery store, you've seen most of them. And then I'd rather just go tour the grocery store, not interviewing management. I'd rather just walk the aisles and see what they're doing. Or if it's a law firm, if you've seen a bunch of people sitting behind computers, you've seen a lot of law firms and accounting firms. There's not a whole lot of need to necessarily see those. But regardless, we do try to go and see them and visit with them, interview management, talk to management, find out who's running the company and how it's being run. And we like to, even though we sometimes ask silly questions, we do like to have a good knowledge base so that we can make the most of management's time and not try to, have them explain things to us more than they have to. And then from all that information that we've gathered, we run a bunch of different tests of value. And I'll talk about the different methodologies and those tests of values in a little bit. And once we get all these indications of value, we try to reconcile them and try to figure out which one's most meaningful to the company and why. For instance, if it's an asset holding company, we may do an asset approach, or if it's a going concern where it's earning a lot of money, it's probably going to be more of an income model. And I'll talk more about those in a little bit. And then from there, once we have a good indication of value from the different tests, we apply the different premiums and discounts and draw our conclusions to come up with a total answer. And so that's a brief overview of the process. And everyone always asks, how long does it take? And the answer is, it depends on our clients. There are some clients who we do every year or twice a year, and they know the process and they have all their stuff together. And if I ask a question, they respond to me in 5 minutes with evidence, and I can just keep plowing through and get the whole thing done in a week or less. And then there are some unfortunate clients where I have to ask them every month, can I get this same information I've been asking for the last 6 months? And it just kind of stalls a little bit. So it always depends on the response time of the client and how easy and organized the information may be so that we can understand what's going on.
Yeah. One of the things we talked about in another podcast, sort of that financial discipline of being able to produce not only financial statements, but KPIs and things of that nature on a regular basis, as well as, the ability to even things as simple as, hey, we do year-end adjustments. The ability to push those back throughout the months of the year really helps in a due diligence. It certainly helps in a valuation process. And if you are getting a valuation for the purpose of either taking the company to the market, they're going to ask you for those same that same due diligence list is frankly the due diligence folder that you put out there now. It's going to be the same set of questions and same types of requests and information requests from you or from a potential buyer.
Exactly. That Venn diagram just looks like a circle.
Yeah. The circle diagram. Yeah. All right, Vanessa, well, back to you. So, what are some of the things that really drive considerations in the valuation process? So Riley has talked about, the types of company data that to put together, but what are the kind of the lever points in that valuation process?
Sure. So, a lot of people would come in and just say, like, well, what's my multiple? What's my multiple? I know my competitor down the block just sold for 7, a year ago. So is my multiple 7? And so, of course, the answer is, well, it depends. I mean, the multiple depends on so many factors. And I remember I went to a client, it's a long time ago, we got all the financial data, and I started asking questions about competitors. Said, why do you want to know all this? And, we have to put the story of the company, or the qualitative analysis is typically, as important or more important than looking through the numbers. So we're looking at things like, the economy. So, maybe your competitor sold for 7 multiple a year ago, but the economic outlook was great, and now we're heading into a recession. You're going to get a totally different multiple. And things like the industry, of course, have a great effect on the multiple, and the timing, because some years, technology is so hot. Everyone's getting into AI right now, so they're getting these huge multiples. If you want to sell something to retail, good luck. That's a little more difficult. But those things change over time. I mean, there's hot industries, depending on the timing. Also, the geography where you're located, and the demographics of the population. Is it a growing area? Do you have the ability to go to different market areas? I guess the main things people are looking at when they look at multiple is, do I have the potential to grow the business and grow the cash flow? And what is the risk of doing that? And so all these questions we're asking about are trying to assess that risk. One thing we see is like customer concentration. I mean, that could be a deal killer, as you know.
Yeah.
So, we've seen studies where as little as a 10% customer concentration has a very big effect on the price. So while that relationship is really important, and we've seen, our clients who are serving big customers grow exponentially with those customers, which is a great thing, right? But also they're very dependent on that company. And, they change management or they sell, that relationship could be damaged. So we've worked with clients over the years to try to diversify their customer base.
Yeah. We were actually talking in a prior podcast with Zane Torrance from the Founders Advisors in Birmingham. You guys may or may not know them, but he mentioned the same thing. There are times when you're not sellable given a certain level of concentration risk. So I guess.
And a lot of times those relationships are very personal. It's the founder of the company you're working with has worked for years with another owner, and when those people are gone, the relationship dissolves.
Right.
I do have one interesting story. A customer we're working with, and they had 60% of their business at one of the refineries here, and we're working hard over the years, a couple of years, trying to get them diversified. I think they had about 80%. And they'd managed to drop that down to grow their other customers to where it was about 60%. We're getting there. They got an offer I'd say out of nowhere, but they got an offer. They've kind of been for sale, but while we're working on lowering the customer concentration, offer that completely disregarded that concentration, and it was because the buyer had been dying to get into that refinery, and this was their back door into it. So
Yeah.
they bought our client, and then now they had an MSA into there to go sell all of their services. So, in certain cases, it's okay, but many times it's a deal killer.
Right. Can I ask you one follow-up question on the concentration component? So I've seen some companies that have concentrations year over year, but which company it is, 1 year it'll be the company X is 25%. The next year it's company Y. So if you got 3, 4, 5 years of we always have someone that's a big client for the year, but that rotates out. Is that you can probably make that more acceptable? I guess it all depends on
that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. And you see that like in industrial services, when they work on plant turnarounds, every year somebody's going to be 20-25% of their revenue, but it goes from plant to plant. So that's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess, when we're talking about concentration, of course, supplier concentration is also could be a big risk factor. You don't want to rely on one producer. We saw this like in the China trade wars, where a lot of people had Chinese suppliers and all of a sudden they didn't, or the prices went way up and they're scrambling to reestablish supply relationships somewhere, or that place could go down, and lots of a natural weather event or something could take out your supplier. Another thing that's interesting is distributor relationships. So, you need to look at, hopefully you have a contract. A lot of times, it's just a long-term relationship. The contract expired 20 years ago. It's never been renewed. So, you need to make sure if you're going to sell that business, that relationship is transferable. A lot of them have where the manufacturer or provider has a right of first refusal.
Yeah.
They may know who they want you to sell the business to. It may not be the same person that you want to sell to.
Right.
So
sometimes that'll absolutely affect the valuation, right?
Oh yeah.
If you limit the target audience to one, it
yeah. And I don't think that's really permitted, but it's certainly industry practice.
Right. Yep.
In a lot of industries. I guess some of the other things we look at is, competition. Are your competitors very strong? Are the competitors consolidating? And a lot of times what we see is when the competitors start consolidating, you'll see like a big company start to gobble up the smaller private companies. And usually that works well for our client, because as the bigger companies, they cut the service, they ruin relationships, and so the fallout a lot of times is good for our private company client.
Yeah, we have similar. We see similar with our clients as well.
Yeah, and our clients usually have kind of a niche, and they do that very well. And the big companies just can't do it. They're everything to everybody, but they can't provide that really specialized service. Another one I'm sure we've talked about is the management and the employees. And, if you're the owner of the company and everything is in here, like all your customer contacts, supplier relationships, etc., and you say, hey, I want to sell my company, here's the keys, that's a lot of value walking off. So, you really want to get kind of a good management bench, people that can take over the customer relationships and production and all that stuff when you walk out.
Yeah.
And talking about private equity, there are some private equity that have that specialized management in-house, and that's what they're looking for. The owner says, 6 months, a year, I'm out of here. And the private equity says, great, we've got specialists that can come in and do this. And then on the other hand, you may have a buyer that says, I don't know what I'm doing. You've got to stay for 2 years.
Right. Sign an employment agreement and then a non-compete.
Yeah.
Yep. Any other big considerations that we hadn't touched on in your mind?
I guess Some of the other things are going to be like regulation, and a lot of people hear regulation and think, oh, that's terrible. I mean, it could have a really good effect on your business, right? If you're helping people comply with new regulation. We've got a client who owns a big truck fleet, and when they started changing the regulation where you had to watch the drivers and monitor their speed and everything, our client had actually been doing that for many years. So they were sitting in the catbird seat. They'd already spent all this money. And so, for a year or two before their competitors caught up, they were in great shape. I mean, all their customers are like, do you comply? Yes, we do. Here, we're already ready. Same thing with like technological changes. The auto industry is a perfect example now. We don't know when or how all of this EV things are going to change, and the whole supplier industry to the auto industry, but we know it's changing.
Right.
We just don't know when or even how yet.
Right. Yeah, that's big in our area with Mercedes facility and all of the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3s around us. So we're definitely seeing changes related to that for sure.
Yeah.
Riley, all right. So you touched on some valuation methodologies previously. I think you mentioned asset and income at a minimum. Give us a little bit more, maybe a deeper dive on each one of those from your perspective.
Sure. So, I wanted Vanessa to touch on all those, qualitative factors, because really what we're doing in that process, and as we're trying to figure out, is risk, as she mentioned, and the risk associated with potential future earnings. And the idea for that is, under our income approach, some of the methodologies we'll do are like a capitalized cash flow or a discounted cash flow model. And those are projecting future earnings and then discounting them back to the present, but you've got to be able to associate a certain level of risk for your present value factor, if you will. And so, trying to quantitatively assess the risk that you have qualitatively assessed is a little bit of the art behind the science here. Another methodology you'll see in the income approach a lot of times, although not in the valuation textbooks, but almost every day on Wall Street, is the leverage buyout model. And that's, using the assets of the firm as collateral and the earnings of the firm to pay off debt, and how much equity would you have to put in as well to complete a purchase. And those leverage buyout models are used a lot of times in fairness opinions on Wall Street. Under the asset approach, we're looking at like net asset value, which is the market value of your assets minus liabilities. And really, the asset model is most often associated with asset holding companies, things like investment portfolios or timberland or things like that, that may not be generating as much income, but they are very asset heavy. There are also some industries that are very capital intensive, such as building roads, all the heavy equipment needed for that, especially if it's publicly bid. And so really, you just need the equipment to be able to make the bid. So sometimes the asset value there can control because of the industry. And then the third approach that we will often use is the market approach. And so we'll look to publicly traded companies and actually transactions that have happened recently within the industry of the subject company. And we're trying to figure out any companies that may be as close or similar to our subject company. Oftentimes, these small privately held companies are in a real niche industry, and so it's kind of hard to find something exactly comparable. But we're trying to look, for the same market factors in the industry that may drive value in one compared to the other. Similar to like valuing a house, you're looking in the same neighborhood with generally the same characteristics, even though it may not have the exact same shutters or driveway configuration, whatever it is. And we're trying to do a pricing analysis. So it may be, price to EBITDA, or total enterprise value, that is, to EBITDA, or equity price to earnings, or whatever it may be, to kind of like $1 per square foot for a home. And then we'll apply those multiples to our subject company to try to come up with indications of value from there. And so from, usually end up with 5, 6, although the appraiser might just say, I don't think anything's really going to be comparable or useful except for this one test of value. And that's really up to the appraiser to decide. or the appraiser may decide I need to run 5 or 6. One other thing in the market approach is something called a rule of thumb. And it's really, if you're doing something for the IRS, it is pretty much shunned upon and said not to use. And the rule of thumb is, they actually compile and print these, and it's statistics from people in the industry that say, well, dental practices are selling for, 3 times the number of patient files or whatever you've got, or whatever it may be. Papa John's locations sell for so much per phone call on a Thursday night, or whatever it may be, that they, compile and put together. And really, it's kind of a book of hearsay, if you will, because it's folks who have chatted around at the water cooler and what's kind of prevailing gossip and going around, even though there may or may not be hard evidence behind it, which is why a lot of like the IRS and sometimes courts and things won't use it. But at the same time, it's something that we always look at if there is one. We don't necessarily put any weighting behind it, but if you're talking to someone in the industry, most of the time the person in the industry is going to know that rule of thumb and want to know how our other tests of value compare to the rule of thumb that they've known for a few years. And so we always try to make sure we can reconcile that with the other tests of value so that we're at least in the same industry expectations or something like that. Those are really the methodologies, and there's a great deal more we can go into, but since this is a podcast and I don't want to make any of your listeners fall asleep at the wheel, I won't go too far into that, but I'll happily answer any questions you've got.
You don't want to give me a CPE for my business valuations license or anything like that, right?
Oh, happy to do that, but I'm not sure that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, I don't know if our business owners that are listening want that as well. That I think it is does set a good framework for the discussion around, there are multiple ways to come up via data, the company data, to get with different approaches to give you a range of outcomes. And then, to Vanessa's point, those considerations are maybe the art to the science of some of the calculations related to those things that really, I think, drive folks into, hey, you're at the top end of the range for this because of X, Y, and Z, or you're at the low end of the range for these other reasons.
And it's always important, once you've done all the tests of value and reconciled them and come up with a conclusion, to step back and say, does that make sense? Or should we be giving more weighting to something else or something like that? And do your tests of value kind of, are they close to one another? And if not, why not? Is there a reason why this one is outstanding and we should maybe give that one more weighting? Is it more reflective of the true value for one reason or another? And those are always, got to step back and see the forest through the trees type things.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that is a fantastic overview of sort of the process of valuing a business, and certainly even some of the reasons why you would be doing it outside of selling that business. And anything that I haven't asked you guys that I should have asked related to, for a business owner that's looking either, hey, I've got a 5-year horizon maybe to sell a business, or things of that nature. How and when should we, engage with a group like yours to get a valuation?
So I think, we touched on that, and we do have a lot of clients that we work with for a few years, preparing them for sale, because we also have an investment banking arm. So, usually the earlier the better, but a 5-year time frame is wonderful. You can start there. Take your time to diversify, identify those triggers that are going to increase the value of your business. Particularly if you have to find replacement management, those things really take time. You're not going to find somebody right out the box that's going to replace you. Customer diversification takes time. So, and it's interesting because you can see your value hopefully go up over time, or you can see how it responds to certain economic conditions. So, certainly the earlier the better. Also, if you're doing estate and gift planning and you're trying to transfer that, that's, you usually want to do that kind of in increments over time.
One other thing I'd add is that, as we mentioned, that the process for the diligence for sale or valuation, how much of the same information either the buyer or an appraiser is going to ask for is the same. If you just randomly get somebody who's going to maybe come knock at your door and want to buy your business, if you've got all that information already set and ready to go because you've been doing regular valuations or things like that, and you can respond to the buyer more readily and more quickly, the buyer is going to assess that as you've really got all this together and this is actually quite well organized, and they're going to perceive less risk associated with the potential purchase.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, it kind of goes back to that financial discipline and the ability to provide those things in a quick turnaround. It is an indication of the strength of your management team and the things your management team is looking at on a regular basis. So those are, always positive. So, we said this in a couple of other podcasts. The more prepared you are, the longer lead time you have. It's a better sign for anybody that's, investing in that business on a go-forward basis.
Exactly.
All right. Anything I didn't ask that I should have asked?
I can't think of anything, but you know where to reach us. We're always happy to answer any questions or come back another time if needed.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. We've worked with folks. You mentioned timberland before. We certainly worked on timberland and estate practices before, and straight up business valuations as well. So we appreciate all the work that you guys have done with us and our clients over the years, and look forward to doing a lot more of that as well. As everyone's aware, we're at a tipping point on a lot of companies going from one generation to the other as the baby boomers age out of the working population. If you foresee that occurring, as Vanessa eloquently said, the sooner you can get going on that process, the better for the process of not only valuing, but ultimately either selling or even if an internal recapitalization scenario, family or otherwise. So thank you guys for being here. Certainly appreciate all the insights. It's been a wonderful discussion, and appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Really
All
appreciate
right.
the opportunity. Take care.
Yeah, thank you. All right, well, that's another episode of the JMF Advisor Show. Appreciate everyone joining us today, and if you have any questions about business valuations, you can certainly reach out to JMF or Vanessa or Riley. They'd be glad to chat with you on it. And it's never too early to start asking the questions to prepare for probably one of the biggest things to occur in your investment life. So please feel free to do so. And thanks again, and like, review, and subscribe to our podcast. Thanks for having us, and we'll talk to you soon. If you would like us to help your business or would like to suggest additional podcast topics, simply send an email to info@jmf.com.
And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on YouTube and your favorite audio podcast apps.